Hi everyone, we're back with our flower through lattice blocks all pieced and ready to go. So what I've done here is I have put them on the design wall just like they're set up on your page 7 of your pattern. You have a chart like this. So again, because we kept the numbers on, you're just going to put them in numerical order. So it goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. all the way across. And this top corner always being bag 1. So this is your bag 1, bag 1, bag 1. This is your bag 2, bag 2, bag 2, bag 3, 3, 3, and your bag 4. So the bag, a piece from each of the bags will make one full square. So again, just follow the chart on page 7 to set this up on your design wall or wherever you have room to set it up. So at this point, we're going to cut the sashing pieces that go in between these blocks right here. So it's going to be the short little pieces that go in between. So I'm going to go back to my cutting table and we're going to do that cutting, and then I'll be right back with showing you where they go. Okay, so we're going to take your sashing fabric and we're just going to cut, 5 1-inch strips out of here. So again, I'm just going to square my fabric to start, and I'm just going to put my fold on the bottom here. So I'm using my 8.5-inch by 24-inch ruler. And just a square. It can be a 12-inch square or a 15-inch square, it doesn't matter. So I'm just finding a straight line on my fold. And you just want to cut a little bit off here. You don't want to cut a whole chunk off. So once you've got your straight line, you just butt your 24-inch ruler along your square, and we're just going to take that cut as a squaring cut. So again, you're just inching your hand up as you go so that your ruler doesn't sway to the left. Remove our square, and now we're ready to cut. We're cutting 5 1-inch strips. So you're putting your 1-inch line on the left edge of your fabric. Making sure you're nice and square, and I'm going to cut. So we need 5 of these. I'm going to go ahead and cut 5 of those real quick. Alright, now that we have our 5 strips, we're going to subcut those into 10-inch pieces. So you should be able to get 4 pieces across your strips. I'm just going to leave mine folded in half, so I'm going to put my selvage to my left. And you're just going to square off your end. So again, you're just going to find a straight line on your strip, the bottom edge of your strip, and just square off your end. And now we're just going to cut a 10-inch strip. So I'm just going to use my smaller ruler here. So we want the 10-inch line on the edge, left edge of your strip. So we're cutting 2 strips at a time, and we need 18 of these. So you're going to go ahead and cut the rest of those. Okay, so that gives us 18. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we were cutting 2 at a time. So you should have 1 extra piece left from your cutting. So just remember, we cut these with the strip folded. So if you're using a fabric that has a right side and a wrong side that's very visible, you're going to have to make sure that you put these all right side up. So I'm just going to flip all of mine. On the batiks, it's not always very noticeable, and some people don't like flipping them, to just use them the way they are, but I like to flip mine. So I'm going to put mine all right side up. And then we're going to go and put these in between our blocks. All right, so I'm just going to go back to my design wall here just to show you what I want you to do. Okay, so these strips that we've just cut are going to be going in between the blocks, like that. So you're going to do that with all of these. So you're going to have a little sashing in between all of these blocks. So you're going to go ahead and sew those. I'm going to go and sew mine, and I'll be right back. All right, we're back with our sashing strips sewn in between the top half and bottom half of our blocks. So as you can see here, the halves are all put together. So the next process is going to be to cut the sashing pieces that go in between the top and bottom of the block. So to do that, we're going to go back and we're going to cut our strips again at 1 inch strips. But before we subcut to a measurement, you're going to measure your blocks. And what I did is I measured probably 5 or 6 of them and took the average of that length. So mine are 19 3/4. So I'm actually just going to cut my strips at 20 inches, and then I'm just going to sliver trim on each side of my block. And you can see here on some of these ones that I did, I left some untrimmed, so you can see that there's a little bit of trimming to do if they don't exactly fit on the 10 inches. So you're just going to trim that to make that even, like I did here. Okay, so these top ones still need to be trimmed. The other thing I haven't talked about yet is the paper. So there's still paper on the back of my blocks. If you want to take the paper off, you can. If you're finding it really difficult to sew your sashing strips on, you can take the papers off. And the best way to do that is to, I'm just going to pull this one off here. when you're pulling your paper off, make sure you're pinching your seams, like where you've got a seam, pinch it before you start ripping off your paper so that you're not tearing your seams out. Or try to work from the middle out so you're not pulling your stitches out when because these have all been trimmed, so it's very easy to pull the stitches out at this point. I typically like to leave my paper on as long as I can. In this project there's no bias strips or anything curvy, so it doesn't really matter, but it just keeps everything the same shape until you need to take them off. So but it's up to you. Some machines have a hard time sewing through all that paper, so if you're having difficulty and you're really struggling, just remove the paper and then sew your sashing strips on. I just power through mine, especially it depends on how much time I have to remove paper. I'll leave them on right to the end. So you can just choose to do there what works for you. So we're going to go back to my cutting table and I'm going to cut my strips again, and then we're going to subcut those to 20-inch pieces. But again, this is going to be a little bit variable depending on how you sew here. So because my seam along, like I tend to sew a scant 1/4 inch, so my measurement's going to be a little bit different than someone who's sewing a full 1/4 inch. So we're going to go back to my cutting table. So again, we need 5 more strips that are 1 inch in width. And because I've moved my fabric, I'm just going to take another squaring cut here because I'm not quite straight on the edges, which is pretty normal. Once you've moved fabric, you usually tend to have to re-square it. So I'm just going to take another little sliver off here. All right, so 5 1-inch pieces. Okay, so I've got my 5 strips, and again we're just going to subcut these into 20-inch pieces. So the first time I cut these, I did them one at a time. You can stack them, so I'm just going to show you how to do that this time. Just make sure your salvages are all on the one side. So I'm just going to stack my 5 pieces together, just make sure they're nice and straight. I'm actually going to do it in 2 stacks here. Okay, so like that. And again, I'm just going to square my strips. I'm just going to take my little square here, run that on the edge of my fabric, put that one up against, that off, and do the same thing on this one. So we want 20 inches. So I'm going to use my longer ruler for that. So I'm putting my 20-inch line on the left side of my strip. same thing on this stack. Okay, so we need 9 pieces, but we actually have 10 here. And again, I'm just going to flip mine so they're all right side up. So the first one's right side up, the second one's upside down. So I'm going to flip it right side up. So like that. So that was 4. That's 9, so you're going to have 1 extra piece here. I'm going to put that one to the side. So again, these pieces are going to go in between the top and bottom, so they're going to go right here. So basically what we're doing here is just creating our big block. So when you're done, you're going to have 9 big blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that while you're sewing yours, and I'll be right back. Hey everyone, we're back with our squares all sewn together. So again, before we continue here, I just want to reiterate, it's important to make sure your squares are oriented the right way. Just go back to your page 7 of your addendum for the pattern and make sure that all your numbers are in the right spots, like 1, 2, 7 and 8 should be your first block, and it should be in that order. So if your 1 is here or here, it means that you've turned your block a quarter turn or a half turn. So just make sure everything is in place, and it should look like one big panel, like one of the big Dream Big panels. So if it's not looking like that, then possibly you have something twisted somewhere. So just double check that before we continue. So the next steps are going to be to finish the sashing between the blocks, the rows, and then I'm going to talk as well about the first border around the quilt. So I'm going to explain all that to you in one shot here so that we can go and sew it, and then we'll come back with the finished inside of the quilt. So the first thing we're going to do again is just take an average measurement of the size of our block size. And again, I just took 4 or 5 blocks, measured them, took the average, and that's what I want to cut the sashing pieces that go in between the blocks to create our rows. So for me, again, that's 19 3/4 inches, and it should be similar in length as to the last one that we cut, the little one that we put in between to hook the top and bottom of our blocks together. So I'm just going to cut mine again at 20 inches. So we're going to need 6 of those pieces to create our 3 rows. So you're gonna need to cut in total 13 2.5 inch strips. 3 of those strips are going to be used to cut your little sashing pieces. The other 10 pieces are going to be used for the long sashing piece to hook your first, second, and third rows together, and then the rest is going to be for the first border. So you're going to take those 10 pieces and just hook them all together and then measure your big pieces. So once you have your rows created, row 1, 2, 3 with your small sashing pieces, you're again going to measure the length of that row, and again measure 2 or 3 of them and take the average of that size and cut your sashing pieces for the two big sashing pieces to hook all your rows together. So that you're going to do that. Once you have that all together, you're again going to measure the sides of the quilt first, and measure, and one side and 2 sides, take the average of those 2 measurements and cut your 2 side pieces that measurement. Once you've got your sides on, you're going to measure the top and the bottom, take the average of those 2 numbers, and then cut your top and bottom sashings out, or borders out for the top and bottom. And once we have that and all pressed, we'll come back and we're going to do the border. We'll see you then.